And then there was one. That's right. With the passing recently of Robbie Robertson, there's only one surviving member of the band, one of the greatest musical groups ever, in my opinion, and that would be Garth Hudson, who was 86 years old and in a assisted care facility right now, and supposedly in very poor health, especially since the death of his wife. Now, the band is generally credited with creating what some people might call Americana music, which influenced groups such as Drive-By Truckers and singers like Jason Isbell, bands like My Morning Jacket, Mumford & Sons, many others. But the band did it just so well, blending country and blues and jazz and rock and roll, and also with a sense of mystery and virtuoso musicianship and a sense of humor as well. I was really saddened to hear that Robbie Robertson had died because the band was a big part of my youth growing up in the 60s and 70s. I still listen to them today. In fact, just last week I was getting ready for a road trip up to Northern California, about a 5-hour road trip, so I made sure I had one of their albums all queued up and ready to go on my phone, and the next day was when Robertson died, so that was kind of an odd feeling. But all this brings us to today's episode. This is the Kazdoy Closet. I'm Kazdoy. That's my closet full of all the stuff that I love. But today, we're not going to talk about a film that I love. I'm going to share some reminiscences of and some recommendations for the band. Let's go to the Kazdoy kitchen. Going in chronological order, of course, we're going to start with the band's first album, Music from Big Pink from 1968. This cover is on the reissued CD, and that's a cover painting by Bob Dylan. But the original cover looked more like this. Big Pink, of course, referring to the house, I believe in Woodstock, New York, where they recorded so many of these songs. This is from 1968. And this album had a huge influence on many, many musicians of the day, including Eric Clapton, who wanted to quit his current band and join the band, but that didn't work out. One of my other favorite groups, the Grateful Dead, they said this was a huge influence on them, and it led to probably their two best studio albums, Working Man's Dead and American Beauty. Now, why was this so influential? Well, first of all, the musicianship is just superb on this from all the players. They had 3 very good lead vocalists, and these vocalists would sometimes take turns in one song. Sometimes they would carry the song themselves. Sometimes they'd harmonize. And they also had some interesting lyrics. They weren't just silly love songs. They were all kinds of interesting topics, from rebels to mystical things to Civil War topics. That's throughout their whole discography, really. And some of them were rockers, some of them were ballads, some of them were just kind of mythical songs. This starts off really strong with Tears of Rage. That was co-written by Bob Dylan and one of the other members of the band. Dylan, of course, wrote I Shall Be Released, which the band did a cover of quite often in concert, and he co-wrote This Wheel's on Fire with another one of the band members. To Kingdom Come, I believe, is the only song in the band's discography where Robbie Robertson sang lead. He was not the best singer, great guitar player though. And some of these songs, I've never heard them perform live. Tears of Rage, I've never heard them do that live, though I have heard the Jerry Garcia Band do that one. It's best known, of course, for The Weight, one of their best known songs, and the Staple Singers did a fantastic version of that on The Last Waltz, which I'll get to a little bit later. But these first CDs I want to show you are remasters, so they all include some bonus tracks, some items that are on their alternate takes or outtakes that are on the album, and some that are just not on the album at all. A year later, in 1969, their second album came out, entitled simply The Band, another classic album along with that first one, Music from Big Pink. There's all the members. There's Richard Manuel, who plays piano and sings. Levon Helm, who drums and sings, and sometimes, well, always at the same time. I usually don't see a drummer singing at the same time. There is Rick Danko, he's the bass player and another singer. Garth Hudson is the organist, and he played saxophone and accordion, among other things. And there's Robbie Robertson, of course, the lead guitarist. And on this one, he really takes over as the main songwriter. As you can see, J.R. Robertson, that's him, writing the bulk of these songs, sometimes co-writing as well. This is another excellent album, which has such interesting songs. Some of their most famous ones, like The Night They Drove Old Dixie Down and Up on Cripple Creek. A few bonus tracks here. Again, interesting topics of songs, some of which are very mysterious and kind of inscrutable, but and some are have blended, all their songs really blend country and rock and blues and even jazz, even take solos in some of these songs. With their third album, Stage Fright, in 1970, the rift among the band members sort of starts to begin. They had a new producer, a fellow by the name of Todd Rundgren, and they did not really mesh very well with Todd Rundgren producing. A lot of drug problems and substance abuse problems also started on the scene among the different band members. But this is a mixed one. It still has some of my favorite songs on here, including The Shape I'm In and the W.S. Walcott Medicine Show, which they did several times in concert. Stage Fright is one of my favorites. The Rumor, also, those two they did in concert a lot. Daniel and the Sacred Harp is a great mythical kind of song that I really love. And then there's some bonus tracks on here as well. Of their first four albums, Cahoots from 1971 is one of their weaker ones. They still are playing and singing very strongly, but some of their weaker songs are on here, including Last of the Blacksmiths, Where Do We Go From Here? I mean, I never heard them sing any of these things in concert. Life is a Carnival became kind of a staple. When I Paint My Masterpiece, that's the Dylan song, of course. They did that quite often. And 4% Pantomime is a very loose song that Van Morrison shares vocals on with Richard Manuel, and that's a very interesting song. But the band at this point was kind of falling apart. Now this is Planet Waves from 1974, again a cover by Bob Dylan. This is really not a band album, it's a Bob Dylan album, but he reunited with the band and they are playing all the instruments on here. And then once they made this album, which I think is underrated, they went on tour, and there was a recording of the show on tour. I don't have it. It's called Before the Flood, the same year, 1974. And that was a recording of a show they did at the Forum in Los Angeles. I was a high school senior at the time. Somehow I got a ticket to that show, and that was not easy. There was a huge demand. I think it was only by lottery, but I snagged a ticket somehow. So they shared the bill. The band would open the show with their own songs, and then the second half of the show, Dylan would come out and the band would play backup for Dylan. And this includes one of Dylan's most famous songs, Forever Young, which is another song that Jerry Garcia has covered with his Jerry Garcia band. Their last really good album, and again an underrated one I think, is from 1975, Northern Lights, Southern Cross. I think this was the same year, or maybe the year after this, I saw them again at the Greek Theater in Los Angeles. Some of these songs are a little bit longer than their usual stuff. More use of modern instruments like synthesizers and things like that. But they sound as strong as ever. The songs are really good, including one of their best songs, I think, It Makes No Difference, which has been covered by My Morning Jacket. And this is a reissue from 2001. And in the booklet inside here, it says that it's in the memory of Rick Danko and Richard Manuel. So they had obviously already passed away by the time this recording happened. Now, Rick Danko, and I don't know how he died. Richard Manuel, I believe, was quite troubled. He committed suicide. Levon, I believe, was from cancer. He died from cancer. And then Robbie, of course, and Garth, who I talked about in the introduction. I also wanted to share with you a couple of box sets I have. This one is from 2005. It's called The Band, A Musical History. And that's basically what you're getting here. It's a hardbound book with lots of glossy pictures. And it's really a history of the band. Starting with Look How Young They Are there. Pretty amazing. That's the Hawks. That was Levon and the Hawks. They're the first group. And then they're still young there. And it just kind of goes through their career. There's Big Pink. And there's Rick with Janis Joplin. Some nice photos. So it's okay, this book. And the reason I don't like it, there they are on the Ed Sullivan Show, is because the selections aren't that great. It has a lot of, it is a history of the group. It has a lot of songs from when they were first starting out, when they were Levon and the Hawks, when they were backing up Dylan, what later became the Basement Tapes, and then just a lot of songs taken from the albums I already showed you. So I think sticking with those albums is really a better idea. But if you're a fan, of course, you might want to check this out too. There are how many CDs in here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. But number 6 is a DVD of various performances. Number 6 is a DVD of various performances, which is not a very good quality. Now, if you want to get into the band or if you want to revisit them, this is my favorite. Aside from those first 3 or even 4 studio albums, this is my go-to one here. This is Live at the Academy of Music 1971. This was released in 2013. Now, Rock of Ages was their live album in 1971. It was a double album, but the mix on that was not very good. So these are the same concerts remixed with a bunch of unreleased items shown. They did have a horn section on a lot of these songs as well. So I would start off with this one. Why? Because the song selection is excellent. It's a good overview of their career. Of course, the last one is not included. This came later. And some of the more obscure songs in their discography are here. Their people's favorite songs are on here. There are a few covers, like of course they did I Shall Be Released. They did Loving You Is Sweeter Than Ever, old soul classic. They did I Don't Want to Hang Up My Rock and Roll Shoes. So they did a few cover songs also. And Dylan shows up on a couple of nights. So this is different nights. These are the soundboard recordings. So from what I understand, that's the clearest kind of sound you can get. And it's just phenomenal. All of these here, I believe, are unreleased. And then you have some Dylan tracks. He's showing up playing with the band down here. This is just 3 and 4, all unreleased. There's a DVD also of their performances. And otherwise, it's just mainly a lot of glossy photos. Nothing that spectacular. Some testimonials by people who are fans of the band. But it's just really the sound quality here that is just going to blow you away. That is just so good on this one. Now here's the good news. If you have Spotify, I don't know about Apple Music or other streaming services, but if you have Spotify, all the deluxe editions, the remastered editions I showed you of the first 4 albums are all on Spotify. So there's deluxe editions actually, bigger than the ones I showed you with more stuff on them. They're all on there. This box set and the other box set are on Spotify, and more, including The Last Waltz, which I don't have anymore for some reason. I have the film, but in case you don't know, The Last Waltz was from 1976. That's when the band did their last concerts at Bill Graham's Fillmore West, I believe. And they had a lot of guests show up and perform their own songs and perform with the band. The band was the backing band for everybody. And Eric Clapton showed up, Bob Dylan, Neil Young, Joni Mitchell, Neil Diamond, Muddy Waters, Van Morrison. Amazing. And the film is amazing. One of the best concert films I think ever made. But let's go back to the Kazdoy closet and some closing remarks. I mentioned at the beginning of this episode that some people consider the band to be the creators of the Americana genre of music. If that's true, it's pretty ironic because Levon Helm, the drummer and one of the lead vocalists, I believe was the only American in the band. All the other guys were Canadians. But at any rate, feel free to leave a comment or suggestion down below. Are you a fan of this group? What's your favorite album? I'd like to thank the following people who've left comments since our last episode. Those include Yolanda, Tina, Michael, Martin, Lord Quas, and Paul. Thank you so much for taking the time to comment. Leave a thumbs up. Don't leave a thumbs down. Subscribe would be great. Share this with your friends and neighbors. We are past our goal of 575 subscribers. Thank you all so much. Next goal, let's go on to 600. Wow, that would just be fantastic. Thank you to our newest subscriber, Mike. Thank you for subscribing. And Andrew, thank you both for taking the time to subscribe. Subscribing is free. Also free is we're on the Letterboxd app under the Kazdoy Closet. That's where we leave brief written reviews of other things we're watching. The last one I did, I believe, was the old silent film from Germany, Pandora's Box. So there is a link in the notes down below how to get to us on Letterboxd. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching. Rest in peace, Robbie Robertson. It's such a big loss. And we'll see you next time.